With Notion, you can tell the story of your work. You can connect your project management system to that random, scrappy Excel database that you've got kicking about. You can view the data in a way that's speaking to the rest of the system. Companies spend 6 figures on an office renovation. And it's like, oh, look, we've got a new coffee machine. That's going to improve our productivity. They're spending 97 plus of their time in data entry points. Why not invest time, resources to make sure they actually work properly?
Joining me today is Frances Odera Matthews, a certified Notion consultant and the founder of the Notion Bar. Over the past 3 years, she has helped over 150 global clients build cultures of intention and tell the story of their work through Notion. Frances, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Hello, thank you for having me today. Really, really excited to chat.
I'm excited to chat with you, and thank you for joining me. You're obviously someone who knows a lot about Notion. Caveat to the listeners, I am somebody who does not know a lot about Notion. So I will play that curious individual who is not in the know, because honestly, I think there's a lot of folks there who dread setting up software in general, project management software, anything where you're kind of like going through and you're building foundational architecture for something pretty important. There are some folks who are not anti-Notion, but maybe they're like, yeah, Notion is not for me. But I'm just wondering, from where you stand, who should use Notion and maybe who shouldn't? Like, how do you help your clients understand when Notion is the answer and like when it's not?
So first off, I would say there is definitely a mindset element to it. I kind of use the analogy of you could get your clothes tailored or you could buy them off the rack. Mm-hmm. Buying something off the rack might be fine, but if you spend that little bit of effort and go to the tailor and get measured and all of that, you're going to be 20 times happier with the end result than something you've just bought off the rack, especially if this is something that you're going to use every single day of your life and is pretty much the crux of what you do and how you facilitate your days and your work. And so you kind of have to be in a mental position to be like, okay, I'm going to be forced to sit down and actually think, wait, what do I actually do every day? And you'll be surprised about how many people have not thought through that question. And we're in this junk productivity diet where we just want to go, 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 go. And no one's taking the time to like pause and figure out what on earth is going on. So first of all, you need to be in a mindset where you're okay with pausing and figuring out the mindset is everything. And then just from a pragmatic view, if you've got a bunch of spreadsheets that you've got floating around and you would love those spreadsheets to speak to each other, Notion is probably the place for you. You'll be surprised at how much time you'll save by not having to do like manual data entry like, across the system or across spreadsheets. And so I mentioned earlier about me literally halving my workload as a project manager with creating client portals in Notion. I've worked with 60 to 70 person e-commerce brands to completely overhaul and rebuild their systems in Notion. Again, that was mainly taking all the floating Excel spreadsheets and just bringing them into one place so that everyone has oversight as well on what's going on. A big issue that I see with a lot of businesses is just transparency. People don't understand how data is moving around the company, and with Notion, because everything is on the cloud, when you update something, it updates it for everyone in real time, wherever it's mentioned across the ecosystem. I outed some project management names earlier, but the most common tools that people come to me from are like ClickUp and Monday. Again, because those are purely project management tools, but what people are looking for are holistic ecosystems where everything in their workflow is speaking to each other. They can come in and have a really nice homepage where they can see what everyone's working on, what's due, maybe some cool announcements, and it's really nicely branded. And so, yeah, if you're looking for any of that, Notion is probably worth looking at. Again, there are drawbacks. It is a time investment. So like what I was saying there, you have to be ready and have that mindset and say, I am ready to take streamlining my workflow seriously. And with that, there is a learning curve and there is some setup. The difference of this has a longer term payoff. As this is something you can customize and grow with you in the long run. So like as your processes change, you just switch up your Notion instead of switching to another tool.
Can I just say, I really like the tailored suit analogy. So like you get your tailored suit or buying a wedding dress, right? You come in with that mindset and you've had that thought. You're like, I want it to look like this. Here's what I need it for, because it's something that I want tailored to me. And then I'm like, I will buy a t-shirt off the rack. And that's okay. I don't plan to go and get this tailored. And that's all right, because it's kind of like my day-to-day shirt. It's not like I'm staking my entire life on. It's not for that big, like, whatever, business pitch or job interview or a wedding or whatever. I'm going to wear it a couple days a week.
It's whatever.
Yeah, it's whatever. And I think software can be like that too. But I think that analogy really crisply tells a story of, yeah, some of your tools are t-shirts, and that's okay. Like, you don't need to go hire a consultant to figure out how you're going to use your whatever instant messaging tool, Slack or Teams or whatever. Sometimes that'll just kind of unfold and it'll be a little more fluid. And yes, you use it every day, but at the same time, it's not like everything needs to be perfect around it for it to work. I think that's a really, really apt analogy.
Yeah, I think it's good also what you said there with the stakes being high. So yeah, if the stakes are high to you and your process is that involved and that important to you, then yeah, you probably should get it tailored at some point. You might start off the rack and you're like, you know what, this is really an important crux of my workflow. Let's see how I can make this tailored to me.
Can Notion be a t-shirt off the rack at first? What are some of the limitations or drawbacks of that versus what you've seen actually work quite well? If someone goes in and they're like, yes, Notion, that's fine, but I'm going to tailor it later. Let's just go. What does that experience look like?
So there are a couple of ways that Notion can be a t-shirt off the rack. The first way is that you can find a bunch of templates from across the internet, but they're like a nightmare to use because the databases aren't speaking to each other properly. The user experience hasn't been optimized. So many things. And also don't fall into the junk template diet where you just buy 20 templates and you're like, yeah, this is going to be great for me. You should always take inspiration from templates and take what you need from them and see how you can merge it into your workflow. The other way that Notion can be a t-shirt off the rack, apart from just the many templates are out there, is that Notion does have a starter project management kit with tasks and projects. It's basic for a reason, because they want you to build on top of it. Then you're like, okay, this is great, but in an ideal world, I actually want to be able to add tasks directly from my meeting note template, which is actually a fan favorite feature of my build. People like, oh my goodness, I don't have to like go write it down and then spend half an hour adding it into monday.com. This is crazy. I follow a very intentional bottom-up approach for a reason. So the first stage is discovery. It's figuring out like what software do we use? What could we possibly replace to Notion? What could we connect to Notion? What do we need to track, store, and share? Essentially, that's what Notion is good for. And then you say, okay, well, how can we reverse engineer this into databases? And how can we connect those databases to each other so that it's efficient and we're not doing double data entry all the time and wasting time? Then we go into, well, how can we template out our pages? Like, what would a perfect project dashboard look like? There is a deep art form to database building. But ultimately, you want to get the database and database template bit right. And then from there, you can build your views. And then once that's done, you can just plug and play your dream dashboards, essentially. You can pull views of, let's say you had a big old task database. You can have a due task view on your task homepage, but you could also have a due task view on your main homepage where people are just figuring out what's going on. You could also have that in the marketing section, but just filtered for marketing. So you've got those 3 snapshots of that database in 3 separate spaces of the workspace, but they're all speaking to each other. So unlike spreadsheets, again, which you're manually updating and wasting so much time, everything is just updating in real time, which is, it's hard to say how much that's what, like, it's just invaluable.
In your role as a consultant, who are you talking to figure out things like, oh, do we want task due on personal dashboards and on like the roll-up view on the homepage? Like, is this quite an orchestration of individuals, or who are you usually dealing with to kind of make these decisions about how dashboards work and how the tool itself works?
Yeah, I mainly work with the project managers and the chief of people or equivalent, because they're really the people who are taking the culture of workflow into their hands for the organizations. Even simple things like, outside of project management, even simple things like, we would love our employees to have more of a culture of praising their teammates. Okay, let's build a praise button on the homepage where we're just using behavior psychology as well, because this is the place that they're going to log into every day. Let's put a button where they're going to see every day of where they're encouraged to shout out team members into this praise database, and you can see what people have said before and things like that. So again, it's not just project management, it's all of the holistic things that surround work that need to be tracked, stored, or shared.
I love that. I love that sort of tracked, stored, or shared sort of distillation. And I love that notion of what you said about pausing to think about what it is that we're doing. It's like the inspiring side of the coin, where the other side of that coin is easily just like, does it do the features that we want? Okay, well, what's it cost? Okay, well, let's plug it in and turn it on and go from there. When you put those two side by side, you're like, yeah, one's kind of better than the other, right?
Oh, totally. And on the other side of the coin that you just mentioned there as well, that plug and play, you are forcing yourself to work in a way that software has told you, instead of telling a software how you actually work. Obviously, the first option is going to give you a lot more resistance and friction and feel a lot more unnatural. Whereas when things are just set up for the way that your brain needs to happen and the way your team needs to flow naturally, it just becomes a lot easier. And that's actually one reason why Notion attracts a lot of people from the neurodivergent community as well, because this is like, all of a sudden there's an opportunity to like build things for literally how your brain needs to see them.
I mentioned it up top. There's some rigidity in the way we think that software ought to be. And I'm glad you sort of mentioned that about neurodiversity and the fact that, yeah, you know what? We need to start recognizing that we all work differently. We all think differently. And there's a way to kind of not necessarily force ourselves into a square hole when we can actually make one that fits us better.
The most common way I see that come up in my work is some people hate the Kanban view and some people love the table view, or hate the table view and just will only work in Kanban. But you can just create both in Notion. It's the same data. It's just flipped in a different way.
It's a different view.
Whoever needs it. Yeah.
Is Notion like serious software that can play at an enterprise level as well? Or what are some of the challenges that folks might encounter that might trigger some of these ideas or opinions about it at that level?
I think the bigger you grow, the more you're going to have to worry about permissions. So you're just going to have someone on your team, or hire someone like me to take on that job of figuring out what your permissions architecture is and making sure that people are assigned to the correct team space, essentially. And it might just be someone's job. You might have to hire someone to take on Notion. Like, their job is literally Notion maintenance. And that's not uncommon. We see that with other tools, for example, Salesforce administrators within companies.
Again, I'm going to take this analogy far too far, but right? Like, listen, if your tailored suit like gets damaged, has a stain, has a hole in it, you're not going to be like, oh, this is garbage, I'm going to throw it away. You'll probably go and get it fixed. And you're going to probably have a person, or you will find a person who's like, yeah, I trust you enough and you know me enough that you can repair this or you can make it do something that it didn't do before. Like, I'm definitely not the same weight as I was when I got married. So can we let this out and make it fit better? There's an ROI there, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that if you can look at it that way, the investment of having someone who is kind of responsible for Notion or whatever tool, there is an ROI to it.
100%. It's really funny to me because I'll see companies spend 6 figures on an office renovation and it's like, oh, look, we've got a new coffee machine. That's going to improve our productivity. Look at us. We've got a foosball table now. Your team is spending 1% of their time at the coffee machine and the foosball table. They're spending 7% plus of their time in these data entry points. Why not invest the time and resources to make sure they actually work properly and look nice and efficient?
And yes, we are still seeing a lot of, and sometimes to incentivize folks to come back to the office, they've done a kitchen reno. You know what I mean? But
it's like, have you done a spreadsheet one there?
Yeah, right? Like, yeah. That would actually be great. Do the reverse. We'll just have a spreadsheet themed kitchen. And then it should be fine. I think the other thing that's sort of top of mind, in addition to like hybrid workplaces, is the notion of AI. And I know that Notion was actually one of the first tools that I noticed that actually had rolled out an AI-driven set of features. Are people really using like Notion's AI capabilities in their work? Is it still kind of more of a curiosity? Is there a hesitancy? Or are some folks actually really using it in their day-to-day, at scale to increase that benefit of saving time and doing less data entry? How has the adoption been feeling, and where have you seen it been a bit challenging for some of your clients?
Yeah, I would say the biggest new feature that people are loving with Notion AI is the Q&A feature, where as long as your processes are documented correctly and just data is generally entered correctly across the system, you can ask Notion Q&A anything. You're like, what are we working on this month? And it will pull up an answer for you based on what's in the system or based on the types of clients we worked with last year. How would you recommend we do X, Y, Z? I don't know, like anything like that. Like it becomes truly a second brain, which is a term you'll hear a lot if you start going down the Notion rabbit hole. The other one is to do really practical things, especially within databases. In my own personal workflow, I use Notion AI as a database property to help me format links for my newsletter, the Notion Zeitgeist, which everyone should go follow.
I'll add the link in the notes.
I literally web click things to this database. And then I have a Notion AI prompt as a property, which is get the title of this database page and hyperlink it with the URL of this page, and also add an emoji at the beginning of it based on the title. And that saves me like 30 seconds per thing, which is incredibly valuable because I would have had to format that link by hand, which is no thank you. It's just any kind of manual work, like turn this into a table for me. Like I've just word vomited, like tidy this up. Notion AI can do that for you. Yeah. So lots of really cool things, but my favorite is definitely like the replacing manual formatting for moment, because no one has time for that.
The project managers who are listening, we do get labeled as being very organized and nothing's messy in your world. You're a project manager, but actually doing project management, like in the collaboration, and you're in a meeting and people are just throwing ideas at the wall, and yeah, it's messy. There is a lot of time spent like unmessifying that to make it make sense, to make it look organized so that you look like an organized project manager. But that's not the skill. The skill is that you brought people together and people were throwing ideas at the wall, and then you need to kind of get it into a state where it makes sense to other people who weren't in the room. That's the skill, not the like copying and pasting these words into a thing and formatting links.
100%. And that only really works when you documented your processes correctly. And that's another point where I see companies lose efficiency. So they don't have anywhere written down like, this is how we do X, this is how we do Y, this is what Y looks like in this kind of setting.
I love that. Yeah, the machine can't learn something if you haven't written it down.
Exactly. Exactly.
In a lot of businesses, not all businesses, but a lot of businesses, that is valued. Like, that is a good thing. Oh, yeah, we fail fast and chaos is okay because we get to the answer more quickly. And sure, I buy into that as well. But at some point, it needs to have this pause and this intentional thought to be like, what is it that we're doing? We need to be deliberate about this. We need to document stuff. We need to have our data in order. And it's worth the investment.
Yeah. And ultimately, there is a cost to chaos. And that chaos is high employee turnover rates because people don't want to work in chaos for longer than a few months, like every 6 months, when if you just pause to set things out correctly the first time, you wouldn't have to go through all that.
I love that. There's a cost to chaos.
There is a cost to chaos.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Frances, thanks so much for being on the show. I think this is a really juicy conversation. I'll add all those links in the notes. And again, thank you for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Galen. This has been great.
All right, folks, there you have it. As always, if you'd like to join the conversation with over 1,000 like-minded project management champions, come join our collective. Head on over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership to learn more. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and stay in touch on thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.